Hey there, it's Carly with the Expat Focus podcast. When you live abroad, there's always at least one thing from home that you miss and wish you could have with you. For me, living in Strasbourg, it's easier access to Vegemite and that Australian afternoon blend tea. For Craig Carlson, as a student, and again later as a Hollywood screenwriter working in Paris, what he found himself missing the most were proper American pancakes. So when Craig wanted to make a permanent move from the US to France, he decided that pancakes and other American breakfast foods were the way to do it. Craig started the diner chain Breakfast in America, and almost 15 years later, he's published his first book called Pancakes in Paris. But as you'll hear, setting up and running your own business in France, well, it's a bit more complicated than cooking pancakes. Now, first of all, congratulations on the success of your book. You've been named Best Book of 2017 by Expatriates magazine, and it's a New York Times bestseller. That must be an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I found out about the New York Times bestseller list from a friend who emailed me from the East Coast saying, "Oh, you're on the list." And I just remember just thinking, "Wow, this is a writer's dream. The first book I published, and here we are." And it's something that goes on your gravestone or whatever. It's like New York Times bestselling writer. It's with you for life. So yeah, it's been a thrill.
As an expat in France myself, I'm seeing your book listed everywhere as essential reading. And again, that must be such an honor to be a go-to book now for people looking to move to France.
Yeah, because I've been a Francophile for so many years, and I've read so many of these great books, and to be part of that list is just such an honor. But that said, when I wrote mine, I did know the subject matter pretty well, and I thought, you know what, I've never seen anything really quite this subject. Often you see the romantic version of Paris, someone going over there because of love or looking for love, or they're leaving love and some bad relationship or something. But I'd never seen one where someone goes over there, wants to start a business in a different culture, and all that I had to deal with. I've never read any of that before in a book, the highs and lows of trying to set up your dream in France.
Craig, you started your business more than a decade ago, of course. The market is so different now, but at the time, bringing American diner food to the culinary capital of the world, it probably seemed a little bit mad. Why were you so convinced your concept would work?
Yeah, well, I think it's due partially because I had studied abroad as a student years earlier, and I really immersed myself in the French culture and got so many friends, and I learned the language and all these things that I felt that I kind of knew, what I'd be getting myself into. And secondly, I'd also seen how the culture was slowly changing. Part of that was a bunch of friends that I made when I worked on a TV show here in France, a lot of French friends, and they came over to visit me in America afterwards. And when I would take them to breakfast, they'd go, "Oh, the one meal you Americans do right," because we had this reputation in France at the time, particularly, that all we did was fast food. Americans, you only do fast food and hamburger, and that's it, just crappy food. I realized that so many, especially in a city like Paris, so many French people have traveled abroad. They've gone at least to New York, and if not to San Francisco and LA, and they've taken that road trip to the Grand Canyon, and they've stopped at a coffee shop. And that is the feeling I wanted to create with the diner, that sense of space, that the road, the never-ending road and possibilities and all that kind of thing. But lastly, because I worked in film and TV, there are so many diners and movies, or coffee shops and movies, Pulp Fiction, Happy Days, all these things. So even though the French, if you just asked them, "Do you know what a diner is?" they wouldn't. But if you mentioned Pulp Fiction, they go, "Oh, yes, that's a diner. Okay."
So how was that education process when you first opened your diner and you had to show the French that these were breakfast things? And in your book, you mentioned you had to explain the word diner.
Exactly, yes, because the word diner is dîner in French, which means to eat dinner or to dine. And so our name is Breakfast in America. So people would say, "Breakfast in America, dîner?" I'm confused. What are you serving here? Because breakfast itself is something that at first they didn't really understand, right? The French don't eat breakfast. So, except for maybe the croissant or pain au chocolat, or as many of my French friends, they just have a café en clope, which is slang for a coffee and a cigarette. And that's their breakfast. And they start their day, right?
So healthy.
Yeah, so healthy. They confuse it with the word brunch all the time. And at the time, there were starting to be brunches in Paris. It's starting to become, à la mode. But that would consist of, a little poached egg, viennoiserie, like a small little pain au chocolat or whatever, some yogurt, some charcuterie, like some cold cuts, and maybe a bit of fruit, and it'd be 20 to 25 euros. I was like, okay, this is another thing that I'll do is I'll make sure it's affordable and that people are full when they're done. I would leave a brunch and go run off and eat a crepe because I was still hungry. So in the very beginning, I was just serving breakfast only, and the French would come in and they were like, especially at lunchtime, and they'd say, well, but breakfast isn't that just brunch? Isn't that just something on the weekend? I had to teach them that breakfast is good at any time of the day. You can even have it at night. And at first, again, that was a challenge. French would only come in on Sunday, maybe a Saturday, and have some brunch. And then they come during the week. And I was like, well, that's nice. They're coming in the morning. Then they'd order for lunch. And then finally, after about a year, we were open. My first French customer is at 10 at night. He says, can I order some pancakes now and some eggs and bacon? And I was like, of course. And they're like, wow.
Jackpot.
Yeah, yeah. And that was so satisfying to see that evolution happen.
Craig, I understand you were already pretty fluent in French before you embarked on your Breakfast in America dream. How
Mhm.
important was that when it came to becoming a business owner in France?
Yeah, I met someone American who had opened a bar in Rouen and in Normandy, and he didn't speak any French, and I was really surprised. He'd been here maybe 6, 7 years. I thought, wow, thank God I spoke French when I came here because, and I don't know the circumstances how he opened his place, but me, I had to get a loan, first of all, a bank loan. One of the hardest parts was raising the money. After I had my wonderful idea and I'm all excited and I'm going to make it work, reality hit. I had to raise $100,000 as seed money to get a bank loan of over 200,000. And I'm convinced that if I didn't speak French, I never would have gotten a loan because here I am. I've never had, I don't have a business degree. I never had my own business. And I'm introducing a concept that they have no idea. They can't even pronounce it, if it'll work here or not. And they went ahead and it was hard. I had to go to 10 different banks, but I finally hit one bank. The French helped so much. Getting my location, if I didn't speak French, which is like a great dream location here in the Latin Quarter, my first restaurant. It was an old French couple that were retiring after 35 years, and I didn't find out till after I got the keys that they had people coming in almost on a daily basis asking if it was for sale, and they just nope, nope, nope. And when finally I asked why me, there were two reasons. Monsieur Marin, the husband, said that he liked the concept because it reminded him of his bistro, where other people wanted to come in and change the shoe store or something completely different. And the other is that he found me very nice. And so certainly speaking French helped with that. Otherwise, I'm convinced I would not have gotten that location. So yeah, language is pivotal.
Of course, not everyone's in the position to have already acquired a second language or be well on their way to fluency before they make a move to France.
Mhm.
Do you think it's still possible to start up a business in France and be successful if you are more of a beginner with your French?
I do think so because especially how things have changed. I opened 15 years ago. January will be 15 years, and there've already been so many more changes. Just even the level of customers coming in, the French customers, they want more than ever before I've seen. They want to speak English. They want to practice their English. When I first opened and I'd say, hello, welcome, they would look at me with fear in their eyes, and almost walk out the door. And then I'd go, no, bonjour, bonjour, and bring them in and sit them down and speak in French. And now, just today I was there and so many of my French customers just wanted to speak English. So there is a much larger embrace of that. And I think a business person coming over here definitely does not have to speak French. But at that said, I think it's just courtesy when you're coming to a host country is to at least learn some basics, learn a joke or two in French or something, just to sort of break the ice and to get a real satisfying experience, in my opinion.
Once you made it to France, suddenly you had this bureaucratic minefield to navigate. What were some of the obstacles that you came up against?
Well, yes. One example is when I was looking for investors in America, I had to open an LLC, a small company, and it was so fast. We just wrote up the rules, got it registered, and boom, within a couple of weeks, it was all done. Here, it took me months and months and months to set up what was the equivalent of the French business, and part of it was getting my commercial visa, which I couldn't be the president of a company without having a commercial visa, but I couldn't get a commercial visa without having a business or being an employee here. So it became a bit of a catch-22. So basically, I had to get a French person to stand in for me as the president of the company until I got my visa, then I could switch back over to me. That kind of bureaucracy was nothing compared to once I actually opened and had to start dealing now with the labor laws and the Code de Travail, which has now become a big buzzword in the press because Macron has been talking about trying to change it. That's 3,000 and plus pages of rules, often contradictory, often confusing. And so when I hired my very first employee, my accountant said, you have to have a contract. And I was like, I do for a part-time student because I had worked at Disney in marketing and a nice position, and I didn't even have a contract back in the States. But I soon learned that every single employee had to have a contract. And on top of that, there was only so long you could have them be in a trial period. And after that, it defaulted into a permanent contract, which meant it was impossible to let them go. But I didn't know that. And so my very, very first employee, he was doing okay for the first 3 months until his trial period ended. And then his behavior started changing. It became more erratic. And when I called him on it, he threatened to kill me in front of all my customers. So at the end of his shift, I took him outside and I said, you're fired. And boy, did I not know what I was getting myself into. He quickly went and filed a lawsuit with the labor courts. It went on for almost 2 years, and he won. And
Even though he threatened your life.
even though he threatened my life.
Oh my
And this
gosh.
is where you can see it's a little absurd because I said that to my lawyer. I have 6 witnesses who were in the diner. They wrote testimonials saying that they heard this guy threaten my life. And he said, well, he would have had to threaten your life in 3 different ways. That's kind of the French law. So that was one of the reasons. The other was that I didn't follow all the bureaucratic steps that it was required to eventually let someone go. But they will almost always take you to court. I mean, that's just a given. And they almost always win. I asked my lawyer, how many have you won? And she's like, well, the important thing is, and she just changed the subject.
The important thing is that we try.
Yeah, the point is to keep the damages as low as possible. Seriously, that's pretty much what she said. Boy, was that an eye opener.
Reading your book, Craig, I got so stressed and frustrated for you, especially during the period where you had problem after employee problem and they just kept coming up. And I just really wanted to run in and tell everyone to back off. This is not this guy's dream. And all he wanted to do was eat pancakes.
Yeah.
What kept you from packing it in at that really low point?
Yeah, as you mentioned in the book, I do reach a very low point, literally life and death low point. And I found myself, going, I just got to get out of here. I got to get out of this place. And I stopped and I paused and I said, wait a minute, you wanted to live in this country for so long. You love this place so much, take a breath and this kind of thing, and let's see what we can do. But I really had reached my limit, and I really have to give credit to my French husband because he really saw what I was going through, and he said he decided he's going to help me out. So he quit his job and he came on board. And what was so funny is, as a French person, all the things I hated doing, which is like sending the registered warning letters, by registered mail, and highlighting every single thing that to make your case, to build your dossier, and all this. He loves doing that. He's like, oh, I'm going to send them a warning letter now. And he writes it up and sends it off. And thank God, because I get close with my employees. To me, many of them are like family. Over the years, I've gone to their weddings and I've gone to their baby showers. It's just sad when you have someone who starts off really, really as a good employee and they start changing and things start getting worse. And I have a real hard time dealing with that, where he's able to keep a distance and he can understand and not be intimidated by the contradictory French laws, And even though my lawyer for the labor codes sometimes just says, there are contradictory things, and she'll say, you know what, you just have to go with one or the other and take your chances. He's okay with that, So yeah, if it weren't for him, I don't know what would have happened.
What do you wish you had known and could go back and do differently? Obviously, you had so many obstacles. Reading your book, it sounded like you were a little bit ignorant coming in to Paris and starting your businesses to exactly what you were up against.
They say ignorance is bliss, right? And I have to say, when I had the idea back in 2000, 2001, Anthony Bourdain, who wrote Kitchen Confidential and now is on CNN, very famous chef, wrote his book Kitchen Confidential. And my friends at the time said, "Oh, you're opening a restaurant. You've got to read this book. Oh my God, behind the scenes, it's so ugly. You'll never want to open a restaurant." And I thought, why would I want to read a book like that before I go start a restaurant? So I avoided it. I put it aside. And then when I was writing my book, I went back and looked at it, and it's pretty true. It was, I don't know if I would have had the same energy and the same enthusiasm to open a restaurant after reading that book. And so I'm glad I did it afterwards. But that said, I still could have been more prepared, and I wish I had learned a little bit more about how the labor laws are, especially the whole thing with the contracts, and just that alone. If I'd known a little bit more about that, I wouldn't have gotten myself in trouble as much in the beginning. And later on, I think it's just kind of keeping that distance. The minute someone starts doing something that's a little odd behavior or something, or not professional, you have to write a letter right away, and you have to send it right away. Those kinds of things. If I'd known that and gotten the habit of doing that on early, I think that would have helped run the business a lot easier. But I'm glad I didn't know everything, to tell you the truth.
You did give an interview to the Bonjour Paris website recently where you talk about the often overlooked advantages for entrepreneurs setting up in France. And there is so much focus, obviously, on the difficulties of doing business, for good reason. But how can running a business in France, do you think, be advantageous or positive?
Yeah, that's interesting because in my book I actually don't talk about that, and because like you said, the other things overshadow it so much. That's what all you read about in the newspaper. That's all people talk about. But there are some real advantages, and I think the number one is in America, even this moment, it's been going on for years and years, is healthcare a right or a privilege? And so many people in America think it's a privilege, it's not a right. But here, of course, it is a right. And so, as a small business, I don't have to directly pay for the health insurance of my employees. All I have to do is pay the supplemental insurance, because it's a two-tiered system. I have to 14 euros a month per employee. Now, when you talk to my small business owner friends in the States, they just say it's just crushing, the amount for health insurance that they have to pay per employee. It's in the hundreds of dollars per employee per month. And so, that's a huge advantage here. And another one is liability insurance. My friend just opened a small Korean restaurant in LA, and she said the liability insurance is crippling her. It's just so expensive. And that's mainly because of lawsuits in the States, which, go up into the millions if there's an accident at work. So it becomes very expensive. But here it's covered by the system. So that's a huge expense that we don't have to incur. On a personal level, as a business owner, it's really wonderful to know that my employees can live on the single wage that I pay them. I can't pay them a lot, but the system in France is such that you can get by, a family can get by with one job. And just as an example, some of my cooks just had children in the last few years, a couple babies, and they can go to the creche, the daycare, and that's covered. And transportation, I pay for their transportation to get to work, half of it, so they don't have to have a car and insurance. And sometimes some of them get some supplemental money for their rental and this kind of, the apartments. So there's many things. So I know that I have peace of mind knowing that my employees can live well. Unlike in the States, where many of my own family had to take on 2-3 jobs just to get by, and they're exhausted. They don't take any vacations, and it just adds up over time. You can just see the burnout rate, and you don't have that here.
So even on a low wage, a hospitality wage in France, you can still have good quality of life.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see it with my employees. I've gone to their weddings, their baby showers. They just live well, or as well as friends of mine who have very, very decent jobs in the States.
We've got French President Emmanuel Macron, who is, of course, determined to drive through labour market reforms. How would they impact you as a business owner in France, and are you supportive of his plans?
I am supportive of his plans. Julian, my French husband, and I have talked about it quite a bit. And I've talked with my accountant and my lawyer about it, because I'm trying to get the details. They say in broad strokes what they're going to try to do. One of them, as I mentioned, this labor lawsuit that I had in the very beginning, is to try and to cap the amount that employees, especially new employees who haven't been working very long at a company, they go to labor court. There's a certain cap on the amount, which is so important, because that first employee that took me to court after I fired him, could have put us out of business. So that's something I'm really behind. And the other ones are a little less clear. There's things that concern larger companies. For example, letting the company internally decide some of the rules of the employees instead of going to a larger panel or labor board as it is now. They say certain employee charges are going to be a little reduced, so that'll be great. But I think if anyone, any rational, logical person looks at what's presented, it is so small. So the reaction, of course, is so big from the people on the French going on strike and protesting. You think, oh my God, there must be some major reforms, but they really aren't at this moment. There was more flexibility in the way we can schedule people, the way we can up their hours if we need them. Someone goes on vacation and someone wants to work extra overtime and this kind of thing. This is so hard to do right now.
Yeah. So there might be small changes, but anything is good.
Anything is good at this moment, yes. Yeah, you sort of take what you can get.
Craig, what's the best piece of advice that you could offer anyone wanting to fulfill their own business dream in France?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think for first, I think it's really important to love the country because of some of the obstacles we talked about earlier. You have to really appreciate the quality of life here and all that it has to offer, you know. And we mentioned a little bit earlier how I've known people, Americans who've lived here for years and years and years, and they don't even speak the language, you know, at all. I mean, not even they can have a conversation. And I can't help but think, boy, they're going to miss so much out of the culture. So on a personal level, I think my recommendation is just be ready to just immerse yourself in the culture, and that will help you in the business sense too. Because one other positive thing, which ties into this question, is it does force you to sort of chill out a little bit because you know when you want everything to be clear and follow the rules and do things in the right way, it can drive you crazy here because it just can take so long, right, for everything. And so by immersing yourself in the culture, you start to realize, oh, you know what, something that seems so important to me, you know, as an American is important to the French, but not as important as a vacation, for example. So
That's so true.
you know, and as a business owner, of course, you don't have that luxury because you do have to put in the hours that are needed. You don't necessarily get the same amount of vacations, at least not in the first few years until your business is up and running, right?
Of course.
You have people that can watch the business while you're gone that you can trust. Those kinds of things happen. I'm like, oh my goodness, we have to get this paperwork done by this, and this. And you call up and the person's not there, they're on vacation, and but you're actually covered by that. You can just say, well, you know what, the person wasn't there, I couldn't do it. You know, it kind of eases all that part of the business that can be frustrating for an American. The hassles of dealing with bureaucracy is more than made up by the quality of life here. So my advice would just be to embrace that. And you know what? There are hugely successful business here in France. We have a third restaurant that just opened. And if I probably had a business background, there'd probably be many, many more restaurants because I had requests, especially the first 3 or 4 years, from people all across Europe saying, you know, would you be interested in franchising it out? We'd love to open one in Rome. We'd love to open one in Morocco. I mean, I had just all over. So,
And are there plans for that, Craig? Your business is now thriving, of course. You've got 3 Breakfast in America diners in Paris. So what's next? What can you share with me?
well, it's interesting because during my book tour, it sort of brought up a whole nother level to the business itself and where I am in the business. And I spoke at a international business school. And I realized afterwards, oh, this was a great resource I could have used because it was interesting. They had me on a panel there were 3 of us on both sides of me were people that had started these billion-dollar companies. And here I am in the middle with talking about my restaurant.
Not
And that's
intimidating at all.
yeah, and that was one of the reasons they brought me because they wanted the contrast to see that the same passion, the same energy is required no matter what kind of business you do. But what I wish I had said at that point is to say, you know what, I want to expand, I want to go to other countries, but I need resources. I need someone behind the company that can help us take it to the next level. And the next time I speak at a business school, that's something I'm definitely going to do, or any kind of forum like that, because I think it would be great if a group came in and wanted to invest in the company to make it bigger. So.
I have to say, and obviously it's like a bit of a Der Frederick moment. I'm reading this book. I'm thinking, my God, this would make an amazing movie. Of course it would. You were a screenwriter. So are there any plans to bring Pancakes in Paris to the big screen?
Well, yes, actually. There's a production company in Hollywood that optioned the rights to the book. And originally they wanted to do it as a film. And they sent it out a little bit to get some feedback. And it kept coming back saying, you know what, there's so much material here. It would be great as a series, a limited series, a Netflix series, Amazon.
Oh, that would be so exciting.
Yeah. And so I was back in September. I had 2 meetings with the company. They introduced me to some writers, sitcom writers, that kind of thing. So right now they're trying to find what's called a showrunner. It's more of a producer comes along and is like, okay, this is how we're going to approach the series and this is how we're going to cast it. And they just go from there. So I'm over on this end of the ocean now, just, holding my breath, hoping they find a showrunner and that we can, go from there. So it would be really, really exciting. And then what's great is the production company I optioned the book for would have me involved with the writing and the consulting. And that
Again, such a natural fit, but my gosh, you'll be busy if you're doing
yeah,
that as
exactly.
well.
It would be hard to expand to, Italy and things like this with the restaurant if I'm working on a TV series. But certainly it would become more appealing to expand as well.
It's been such an amazing story, and it sounds like it's only just beginning in so many fronts, Craig. Congratulations on everything you've achieved so far, and really looking forward to seeing where Breakfast in America diners are going to pop up next, and logging onto my Netflix sometime soon and seeing Pancakes in Paris, a series.
Yeah, and then you see Bradley Cooper starring as me and going, wait a minute, that doesn't look like Craig. But that's all right.
It's exactly what you look like. What are you,
That's,
who are you
that's who I'd
kidding?
like to play me. Thank you.
Well, that's it for today. If you want to discuss this episode, ask questions, or share your own experiences of running a business in France, head over to expatfocus.com, follow the links to our forums and Facebook groups. You can find more podcast episodes at expatfocus.com/podcast. They're also on iTunes, and I'll catch you next time.